Dr. Michael Imhotep. I just granted a doctorate to you, Brother Imhotep, because you deserve it.
Yeah,
He's in the studio with us. Hey, before we go any further, get in the first of, I'm sure, many shameless plugs to come. I'm just joking. Hey, when and where is your lecture coming up?
Yeah, well, I'm doing a 2-day lecture series this weekend at the new Nandy's Knowledge Cafe, located at 71 Oakman Avenue in Highland Park, Michigan. For those who don't know, Highland Park is right inside of Detroit. It's taking place Saturday, February 3rd, 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Sunday, February 4th, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. And the first day will deal with breaking the chains. Why we celebrate Black History Month, exposing the myths, some of the things I've talked about. I got a lot of other stuff in store. We'll deal with the history of African American History Month, why it was created, what we need to do to make it relevant for today and the future. We'll deal with who was here in this country before Native Americans came into existence. We'll dispel some other myths, like why the Black John Hanson wasn't president, a lot of other things like that. Then the second day, Sunday, February 4th, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m., we'll deal with the light of ancient Kemet awakens the African mind. The light of ancient Egypt awakens the African mind. Visit our website. Information is at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can also call 313-462-0003. 313-462-0003.
When one begins the study of one's own history, I'm talking about specifically for African Americans.
Sure.
What are some of the myths that we have to overcome about ourselves? And you know what I'm talking about. Because it's not like I wasn't told anything about myself.
Right.
Some of the things I was told about myself simply were not true or were misleading. I'm sure you run into folks who have those issues all the time. And I'm curious, what kinds of things do we think or have learned about ourselves that maybe we need to take a second look at?
Well, one of the big myths is that our history first started in this country August 20th, 1619, when that Dutch warship brought 20-some-odd Africans to Jamestown, Virginia. Even though that did happen, it was actually an English warship as opposed to a Dutch warship, even though that did happen. Even when you look at the enslavement of African people, the Spanish were taking Africans into the territory called South Carolina in the 1520s. About 100 years before that. That's not even talked about. But African people, we've been here in this land going back at least 51,700 years, even before Native Americans came into existence. So there's so many myths. And when our children learn that their history starts in this country, conquered and shackled and chained, conquered by Europeans, it automatically gives them a subconscious inferiority complex.
Yes.
Okay. So you're automatically starting at -10, trying to dig your way out. All right. Another myth is that Columbus discovered America. Well, a lot of people know that he didn't discover America because they say there were already people there. Well, that's one reason. But the other reason why, because he never came to the land we call it. He never came to the land we call the United States of America. Right. So you look at where he goes on his 4 voyages. First voyage, August 3rd, 1492. He sets sail in the Nina, the Pinta, and Santa Maria. He goes into the Caribbean. He goes into Central America, South America. He's in Cuba, Haiti, Puerto Rico, Honduras, places like this. He never comes to the land we call the United States of America. Right. Okay. So why in Detroit they have a statue of Christopher Columbus? I still can't figure that out. That makes no sense. He was a master of genocide. Why he never even came here?
I was about to say, when you read his writings, we're led to believe that he was an explorer and a discoverer. He was a conqueror and a murderer.
He was a conqueror and a murderer and a con man, like the one we have in the White House.
Wow.
Yeah.
Christopher Columbus and Donald Trump. We'll have to talk about that sometime. Yeah. what are the impacts of having bad information? And I could talk about this all day, but I'd love to get your perspective, Mike. Sure. What are the impacts of having bad information about yourself, particularly on your children as they grow up? You talked about starting off in the hole, feeling that you're inferior. Right. But there's some other impacts that I have seen on our young people.
Well, you know, what you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So if our history and culture had no value, it would not have been taken away from us. It was taken away from us because it was very powerful. And your history and culture gives you your foundation. It gives you your VIPs, your values, your interests, and your principles. And this influences your worldview. It gives you your cultural paradigm that you see reality through. It influences your economic empowerment and your political empowerment. So when you have bad information, you make stupid decisions. Okay, so this oftentimes is what we're operating based upon.
Right.
So it's extremely important, and in every ethnic group in America, for the most part, they have their history and culture intact, and they use that to fight for scarce wealth, power, and resources.
Interesting. Another question I'm going to ask, and we're going to go to the phone lines.
Sure.
Our number is 313-778-7600, by the way, folks. 313-778-7600. I want to get into this whole concept of self-image.
Okay.
Specifically, I grew up in a very, very colorized black community, or color-conscious black community.
Right.
If you were light-skinned, if you had straighter hair, you had favor, you had advantage.
Right.
If you were a light-skinned black girl with straight hair, all the brothers loved you. If you was a light-skinned brother with wavy hair, all the girls loved you, and everybody else got the leftovers once those had been picked through.
Right.
But where did that come from? How is it that the image of the white European became a standard of beauty for us?
Came from white people. It came from white supremacy. So what happens?
The white people didn't say, "Hey, well, let me slow down. I'll start to make a statement. I don't know if that's true.
Okay.
I know that whites gave preference to lighter-skinned blacks, and that's because there was half their kids in many instances. That's how they got light.
Right.
But how did we take that on ourselves? How did we all of a sudden start treating ourselves that way? White people didn't tell us, amongst you treat each other based on color, even though they did. Is that where we got it from?
It's based upon the way they treated those, and it is based upon the media. So based upon the way oftentimes they treated those African Americans who were fairer, lighter skin, who had wavy hair, straighter hair, things like this. So it's important to understand that racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race. Racism comes out of the concept of white supremacy, and it's designed to preserve genetic white survival. So racism has nothing to do with not liking people, calling people racial epithets, things like that. People have it totally confused. That's bigotry.
Right.
Okay? Racism is a power structure. So if you go back to 1638 in the colony of Maryland, you had a doctrine called the doctrine of exclusion. The doctrine of exclusion stated that Negroes should never be permitted to enjoy the fruits of white society. It's later going to be expanded to state that Negroes should be relegated to a non-compensated, non-competitive managed workforce for the comfort building of white society. So you're going to have this, you have things like this encoded into the laws. Okay,
Yeah, it was legislated.
It was legislated.
Yes.
You're dealing with public policy.
Yes.
Public policy has been kicking our behinds for at least over 246 years in this country, 350 years, whatever it is. Public policy has been kicking our behinds. So this is why we have to understand law. So, and then you have the law, and then you have the distorted images fed to us through the media. Okay, whether it's the minstrel shows, going back to 1828 to 1829 with T.D. Rice, Thomas Dartmouth Rice, who was a white man who created the Jim Crow character. And he's known as the father of the minstrel shows. And he puts on blackface and tattered-torn clothing and adopts a southern dialect, and it's designed to lampoon and make fun of African people. This is during slavery. Well, the minstrel shows become the most popular form of entertainment in the country.
Right.
Not just in the South, but also in the North. Right? So when you have books, when you have children's books like 10 Little N-Word Boys,
Yes.
when you have cartoons and caricatures and things like this that dehumanize African Americans, this comes out of an ideology of white supremacy that did not always exist, by the way. Also.
But we were affected by. Let me tell you a couple things that came to mind. One, I was watching the documentary about Bob Marley.
Okay.
And they were talking to Rita Marley, his widow.
Yeah.
And she was talking about how when she first met Bob, she wasn't real crazy about him because he was light, and how all the women, all the girls back then wanted the darkest man they could find. And I thought, what a concept. That's the absolute opposite.
In Jamaica, though.
In Jamaica, yes. That's the absolute opposite of what has happened in this country.
Right. Well, because in Jamaica, they were allowed more to keep their culture. See, in this culture, in this country, for the most part, our history and culture was stripped away from us. In Jamaica, they were more allowed to keep their culture, and you're dealing with you're really dealing with the propaganda of the media and not having the history and culture to teach you to love your dark skin, to love your African features, things like this. And then, if you look at Malcolm X, for instance, right, and you go back to like the the 1930s, things like this, and the brothers are wearing the conch hairstyles, and you got Cab Calloway and things like this, right? And they're doing this. They may not consciously think that they're trying to imitate Europeans, but this is what's taking place. They might and if you watch the Malcolm X movie, they're putting lye on their hair, which is burning their scalp. Man, to straighten their hair.
When I was a kid, I sat in the basement and saw some cousins of mine conch their hair.
Right.
And they went through the exact same procedure.
Right, exactly. So what happens is when the entertainers start doing something and the women like it, oh my God, then all of a sudden what used to be crazy, now that David Ruffin has it, now everybody wants to do it because all the women passing out looking at David Ruffin. Okay, so when the entertainers start embracing something like that, because the entertainers are oftentimes change agents, right? Either good or bad. Okay? So when they embrace this and it gets accepted by the mass, then it gets accepted by the opposite sex. Then it gets adopted.
Something else that I came across recently too, I was going through an old issue of Ebony magazine.
Okay.
And there was a huge ad there for Nadnola, which will lighten your skin. And I think the ad said, great things happen to fair-skinned girls. And I looked at that and thought about that and said, oh my God, this is in a black publication. And black folks are essentially demeaning themselves.
Absolutely.
Putting themselves down. And so I'm still at a quandary as to how in the world we allow that to become our standard of beauty.
Well, when you don't know who you are, you'll imitate who you've been taught to be. Okay, when you don't understand who you are, when you don't understand your history, you'll imitate. So these images are shown to you. You're shown to imitate your oppressor, to be like this. If you can get the light-skinned girl, you get the light-skinned girl when you acquire more a higher-paying job. You acquire a degree or something like this. You have things like the brown bag test. You have organizations that
the blue vein test.
Yeah, the blue vein test to keep darker-skinned people out. When you look at some of your HBCUs, even though HBCUs are valued, right? When you look at some of the origins of some of the HBCUs, a lot of them were founded by white people, but also some of them, like Howard, is going to be the lighter-skinned people who originally could go, oftentimes, and is going to be the ones who were oftentimes the offspring of interracial relationships as well. Oftentimes those were white politicians, white senators, things like this, right? So when you study this history, you'll see this taking place, but this is all designed around the allocation of wealth, power, and resources into the hands of the dominant white society or those who do the bidding of the dominant white society.
A very special guest, Michael Imhotep. We have, I've talked long enough. Let me get on the phone lines where we've got Harold on the line. Harold is online. Hey, Harold, thanks for calling. You're on with Michael Imhotep.
Hey, how you doing there, Cliff?
Hey, how's it going?
Hotep.
Hey, how you doing, Harold?
Well, it's great to hear you again, Hotep. I'm the gentleman who had called right before you were going off when Walter called.
Okay.
You kind of shut him up.
Okay, man. Let's not mention the mentally brain dead, but go ahead.
I'm waiting. I know.
I think he's on the line holding on right now, actually.
You can keep holding.
Oh, he is? Oh, my goodness, I can't wait. But this is my original topic was about this Nunes memo, but I'm going to bypass that because we're talking
it's
about
a dud.
now.
Yeah, and Michael Imhotep is probably qualified to talk about the Nunes fake memo, too. But go right ahead, my friend.
Go ahead.
Well, what I'm going to get to, and I did ask you this question, if you remember, in regards to Africa, when I talked about the black slave wars between the different African tribes in Africa when they were selling each other to the white man on the waters. Now, what difference do you see in that than you see now modernly when you talk about the different gangs? Everything's about money, because back then it was about money. And money and goods. But even now, when you talk about the different gangs and the different organizations, and it's as if we're so divided, we're conquered, and we're just steadily talking history, we're talking this and that, but yet we don't have a therefore. Therefore, what do we do right now as a people to move forward? And before, if you remember, when you were just talking about hair, right? When they were doing their hair processing, but that song, "Say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud."
Right.
those businesses went out of business because Afros came in and they went out. So
which businesses went out of business?
Talking about the conch business.
Galvanize our young people, galvanize our community, no matter if you're Republican, Democrat, that we're working towards helping each other, and sometimes you have to be on all fronts. So I can't speak against Walter or Wayne Brady and Kerry, but if they're coming from a point of view to help all of us, then we need different people in those different tents. But if you're
who is all of us?
Speaking to the point that this is
who is all of us? Who is all of us?
Then,
who is all of us?
You mean all black folks? When you say that somebody who can help
black folks,
okay,
different tents.
Yes. Okay.
So, in as much as we may feel for a particular tent, but if you're doing it as a medium to help except just yourself, then I understand that. But if you're just there just because, as you say, you don't have any facts or you don't have any behind you, then you're hurting everyone, even yourself.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Harold, I appreciate the call. No, you made some good points. I'm going to jump in first, and I'm going to let Mike Imhotep say that. First of all, and I won't even mention any names, but those black folks who walk lockstep with the Republican Party, I'm sorry, you cannot convince me that they have love of self. Anytime that you support a party that openly, knowledgeably has used a Southern strategy, has used blatant racism, has used all types of divisive tactics based on race.
We're doing it right now.
That's what I'm talking about. Then you can't tell me you love black people too, and you're for black people. I just happen to be a Republican. I think that there's a contradiction.
Now, there's some Republicans there's some black Republicans that I know and like. Dr. William Picard is one of them. Okay? Dr. Bill Picard.
I like him too.
Yeah.
But I cannot understand any self-respecting black person being involved with a candidate who blatantly used racism to get elected, or a party that has decades of employing a Southern strategy to win races.
And you have some black Republicans. Sir Michael Singleton is one of them. He got more backbone after he got fired by the Trump administration, by the way. But Sir Michael Singleton is one of them who, denounces the voter suppression tactics, things like this. So you have some, but you got some other ones like Bruce Lavelle, Pastor Dale Scott. You got some of these other sycophants out here who just turn a blind eye. Right.
Well, they're in it for the money.
Well, they're some of the same ones who would have turned in Harriet Tubman. That's why she had to carry a gun.
Let me get back to your question here, because your original question was, therefore, what do we do now? And I only advocate that black folks do three things. One, know and understand your history. Two, love yourself. And three, come together to unify. Because if you know your history and you love yourself, when you come together, you will do the right thing. That's my thought. That has been my belief for a long time. I'm sure Michael Imhotep has a more elaborate answer than that.
Yeah, your history and culture gives you your VIPs, your values, your interests, and your principles, very important. And then you have the economic empowerment component, so that we become the #1 employers of our people, just like every other ethnic group in this country. So in 2007, we had 1.9 million African-American owned businesses. In 2012, we had 2.6 million. Today it's probably 3 million. We know that African-American women are creating businesses at 6 times the national average. We have to continue and expand the support of these businesses, but also understand these are the ones most likely to employ our people as well. And then also the political component is extremely important. So not only do we have to engage in economic guerrilla warfare and redistribute the pain through targeted, sustained economic withdrawal strategies to those doing harm against us, all right, like the Fox News Network. But the other thing is because if you understand history, you understand that public policy has always kicked our behind.
Yes.
Okay? And during the Civil Rights Movement, African Americans understood this. This is why they fought for a Civil Rights Act of 64. This is why they fought for a Voting Rights Act of 65. And not only were they fighting for that legislation, but they were fighting to break down the walls of Jim Crow, and also to attack the violence that was inflicted upon them to maintain the Jim Crow system. Yes. Okay, so when you have the breaking down of the Jim Crow system, you're also attacking the racial violence being inflicted upon you. So because we understand that, and we look at what the Republicans are doing largely. And that's the problems with some Democrats, but largely 95% of these negative policies are coming from Republicans. If if the laws and policies are kicking your behind, then we have to master and engage in political self-defense.
Right.
This goes way beyond voting. We have to understand how politics impacts every aspect of our life, understand how to disarm them of that weapon that they're using against us, and use it against them. So we need to understand the law better than they understand the law.
Right. And Mike Imhotep specified economic entrepreneurship and coming together and politics. I'm saying if we have self-love and self-awareness, that stuff will come.
That's the foundation.
Yes,
yeah.
You
but
you have to
yourself. You have to understand those different levels.
Yeah.
Then we have to also continue to support African American media, African American owned media, and media that targets us and does it in a positive way and gain control of more media. Because what's taking place right now is a gentrification of the media airwaves across the country. If we look at Sinclair Media, the reason why the TV show Underground was canceled was because WGN, which was part of the Tribune media conglomerate, they were bought by Sinclair. Sinclair bought about 200 TV stations and turned them into little mini Fox News stations.
Yes.
So they're very right-wing leaning, and then they're required to run commentaries favorable to the Trump administration at least 9 times a week, and the person they have doing it is Boris Epstein, who was one of the biggest sycophants,
yes,
one of the biggest behind kissers and liars in the Trump campaign.
That's why he's in that position.
That's why he's in that position.
Lying
exactly.
is a prerequisite. Let me get back to our phone lines where, let me see, I think Robinson's on line 3. Hey, Robinson, thanks for calling. You're on with Michael Imhotep.
Cliff,
Yes.
in 1970, I was down there in Fort Worth, Texas.
Uh-huh.
And they celebrated Juneteenth Day down there like it was a holiday.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Slaves down there.
Juneteenth, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
my brother asked me, said, man, where you get that from?
Mm-hmm.
I said, man, I've been reading my history, man.
Right,
You
right.
kidding me?
Right.
You know what, Robinson, I'm glad you brought that up, and I appreciate the call. Could you explain Juneteenth Day to the listeners who don't know what that is, Mr. Imhotep?
Yeah, well, Juneteenth is the commemoration of June 19th, 1865 in Galveston, Texas, which, according to the reports, was the last, this was the last group of enslaved African Americans to find out that they were free.
Yes.
Okay, largely because of the Emancipation Proclamation is said. But what happens is, as they go through during the Civil War, after the Emancipation Proclamation, as the Union troops go through these Confederate areas, right, and take control of these areas, they freed enslaved African people. So, and there are various theories on why, because the Civil War officially ends June 2nd. The Civil War officially ends, I think it's June 2nd, 1865. 1865, right? So they're going to find out. They're going to find out after that. All right. So there's some theories into why these were the last to know. One theory is that the plantation owners there in Texas wanted to get another year of work out of them for harvesting the crops, things like this, right?
Well, and Galveston is like an island located off of Houston, so
yeah,
physically it would be more difficult for news and people to get there.
Yeah, but what happens is that you have a national Juneteenth organization, and Juneteenth is celebrated. Now, as more African Americans moved out of the South during the Great Migration, Juneteenth started to be celebrated less and less. Okay, but you have people who still celebrate the day all across the country.
Right. Do you celebrate it, by the way?
I celebrate Juneteenth some.
Right.
It's important to deal with the history of the Civil War and deal with the 13th Amendment, deal with that. Just understand that history. But I think it's something that we should celebrate, but tie it to the larger history also.
Let me see if I can sneak another call or two in here. Let's get William from line 1 on. Hey, William, thanks for calling. You're talking to Brother Michael Imhotep.
Very informative show. Look, I just want to say that the first Before the Mayflower that I purchased was by J.A. Rogers. It was in color. And, of course, I let it out to relatives and it destroyed. Bennett, I got his book, too, and a lot of his references of data in his book, he referenced J.A. Rogers. And so Bennett was not the first one to write Before the Mayflower. J.A. Rogers wrote it. It was in a 8.5 by maybe 12 by, it's a large book, and it was in color. And I lent it out to my grandchildren, and of course, they lost it. I don't know what happened.
Who knows where it's at now, right?
And I wish I could get hold of that, because when he died, all of his works he left to his wife, and she took them to a museum in New York. And that's the last I heard of it. I got a slew of his books.
Thanks for sharing that, William. I appreciate that. I see Brother Imhotep on his computer taking notes. And
thanks for calling. Yeah, I'm familiar with J.A. Rogers, actually. I've talked to William before also.
Yes.
Yep.
All right. Let's get right back to the phone lines. Appreciate you sharing that. I believe it is Terrence who's on line 5. Hey, Terrence, thanks for calling. You're on with Michael Imhotep.
Hey, Cliff, how you doing?
Good.
How's it going, man?
Man, this Titans going to go ahead and get in that tournament, right?
You know what, man? They play against IUPUI tonight. I'm broadcasting the game at around 7 o'clock. And if they are going to turn around their fortunes this season, I think tonight is the night that they need to get started. I'm optimistic that they will try to make a move tonight finally.
Okay. Okay, Cliff, I respect your show, but I'm going to say one thing about the Mr. What's his name?
Mr. Imhotep.
You just call me Michael.
Michael?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to say one thing.
Go ahead.
You remind me of my man, Django, the butler.
Stephen? Why would you say that, man? Oh, I think he hung up.
He probably did, because he knew I was going to blast him. Don't waste time with people like him.
Well, I mean, I take all callers, but I mean...
No, I mean, I'm not saying don't take his call. I'm saying don't waste time.
I can't...
responding to that type of nonsense.
You are probably...
That's why he ran.
You're probably the most
because he knows I'll expose him as a fraud. That's why he
so,
ran.
Anyway, appreciate the call. Appreciate Michael being here. Let's take one more call before we run out of time. And I believe Ronald.
He doesn't even know the difference. He doesn't even know what Uncle Tom is, because Uncle Tom was the hero.
Hey, gentlemen, how are you?
He doesn't
Ron,
even understand
doing,
history.
Man?
Go ahead.
What's going on, brother Ron?
Go ahead, Ron.
Okay. Good afternoon. Good afternoon to both of you. Look here, Cliff, to your question and to both of your questions.
Go ahead.
Where do we go from here? I just want to add one caveat. We cannot forget to teach our young our history and our culture. We are going to be gone at one point in time. So our youngsters must continue to learn our culture, must continue to cultivate our culture, must continue to learn our history, and move that down through the ages. That's where I'm at with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Ronald, I think you're on the money. I appreciate the call a lot, my friend. We are just about out of time. Before we go any further, Michael Imhotep.
Yes, sir.
When are you going to be giving those 2 lectures?
This Saturday and Sunday, February 3rd, February 4th. Saturday, 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Sunday, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. at the new Nandy's Knowledge Cafe, 71 Oakman Avenue in Highland Park, Michigan, right off of Hamilton. Free event, donations accepted. The first day we'll deal with breaking the chains, why we celebrate Black History Month, exposing the myths. And then the second day we'll deal with the light of ancient Egypt awakens the African mind. For more information, visit AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can also call 313-462-0003, 313-462-0003, and I'll be on live Sunday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the African History Network show. We're on Sundays. I'll be here live Sunday night also.
How should we spend our Black History Month?
I think, studying our history, appreciating the fact that we're still here, understanding our accomplishments, understanding our failures, not just in this country, but also studying our history on the continent of Africa and throughout the diaspora as well. It was never designed to just deal with our history from 1619 up until the present in this country also. And teach this to our children. There was a joint study from the University of Pittsburgh and Harvard University, we'll talk about this some Saturday, that dealt with how when parents deal with racial socialization and teach their children about their history and take them to events, things like this, helps their children excel academically. It also helps to offset the negative effects of discrimination and racism, helps build positive self-esteem in their children. So there are documented studies that talk about the importance of teaching our children their history also.
Right. And that applies to white children as well, does it not?
Oh, absolutely. And Dr. Carter G. Woodson felt that the history of African Americans should be taught in every school across the country. Okay, not just African American schools, because he largely believed, and he's correct, that racism and bigotry largely comes from people not understanding about history and operating based upon stereotypes and myths.
I had a white friend, still a friend of mine, but I remember we talked years ago, and he said that the white guys who have a greater understanding of black history and thus a greater comfort around black people are the ones who excel exponentially in this country and in this world, because there's a lot of hang-ups that they avoid by not being entrenched in false or misinformed history.
Well, yeah, and then you have a lot of white people, especially a lot of poor whites, who are manipulated by a lot of those in power and divided because of racism. A lot of them vote Republican, and then the policies of the Republicans screw a lot of poor whites that voted for them because they voted out of cultural anxiety and wanted to keep resources away from African Americans.
We got to make our country great again.
Yeah, because they're operating based upon myths. Absolutely.
Brother Imhotep, tell us one more time how folks can get in touch with you.
AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. If you want me to do a presentation for your group or organization, you can email me through the website or email me info@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com or call 313-462-0003 also.
Always love having you, brother.
Hey, thanks for having me again, man.
February
come back soon.
February got a lot of days in it, and so we got to bring you back.
we got to bring you back, man.
Black History Month, but I celebrate it all year long.
Oh, so absolutely, absolutely.
We will have you back. All right, Brother Michael Imhotep, I got to get out of here. I'll remind you again, I'll be back on the air tonight just before 7 o'clock, the University of Detroit Mercy at home, as they take on IUPUI, game time 7, broadcast time around 6:50, and I'll have that for you. In the meantime, Spud's coming in. I'm going to get out of his way. I don't care how much you know until I know how much you care. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Much, much love, Miss Sharice, and I'm out of here. This is 910 AM, the Superstation. Oh, by the way, thank you, Rachel. This is the future of radio.